Hey, welcome everyone. I've got Kent Burles. Is it your the
Yep,
pronunciation of your last name?
that's right.
Yeah, yeah. Just introduce yourself there, Kent.
Yeah, my name is Kent Burles, and I'm a Toronto-based illustrator slash comic book artist slash teacher. Um, and I've worked in comics, a little bit in animation, a lot of commercial art, a ton of role-playing game illustrations, and I teach at a private art college where I teach students how to create sequential art, comic books.
All right, and how long have you been doing that for the the animation stuff?
This will be my 13th year. Kind of interesting. It's my 13th year in the midst of COVID, but I think we'll survive either way.
Oh, good, good. And for the comic books, how long have you been doing that?
Well, I got started in comics in the mid 80s, which is a while ago now, and that was the time of the black and white explosion, you might say,
Hmm.
when there was, for those who don't know, it was not only did we have, of course, Marvel and DC and other bigger companies, but there was a wealth of sort of small publications being brought out with color covers and black and white insides because it was much cheaper, and their distribution models were different then too. And it was literally an explosion. I when I go into a comic book store today and see the way the books are arranged, it's one thing. In those days, you would go in a store and three quarters or more of the comics displayed would be from small publishers or vanity press things. And everybody and his brother, it seemed, was doing comic books, black and white comic books. Obviously things that came out of that, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, are famous and long lasting, and Dave Sim is part of that as well. But a great book remains to be written about the comic books of that time and what was going on. Part of it was a speculator bubble as well. I remember going my first or second convention after I had a comic published. I had people come to me with stacks of comics, 50 comics at a crack, and they wanted me to sign every one, thinking that great fortunes were to be made in doing this kind of thing. So obviously that didn't happen, but that's the beginnings, way back then.
What was your first title that you worked on?
I worked on a comic called The Adventurers, which was a sword and sorcery comic, and it's kind of an interesting story how I got that. Uh, I had I was at my very first comic book convention as a guest, and it was much smaller, of course, than say a fan expo here in Toronto, and it was a different kind of application process. I went up to the organizers and said, "Can I have a table?" They said, "Sure." That was that. I didn't have to pay for it. I don't think anybody paid for their table. And so I had my workout, and a fellow came up to me and he said, "I like the way you work with markers. Um, I work. I'm doing a comic, but I can't do it. I've got too much work, and I think your style is kind of like mine, and maybe the publishers would be interested." I said, "Great." So I submitted some work to them, and that guy was Peter Sue, who at least in those days was a well-known personality in the Toronto comic scene. And it was, as I had submitted stuff to Marvel and DC um, uh, before this, but that was the first job, and that was a classic black and white explosion comic book, color covers, black and white insides. Um, Peter would paint the covers. He was a masterful airbrush painter. A few of them I penciled, and he would paint over my pencils. And then I did the insides in full tonal values using markers and pencil crayons. The very first issue, the printer was near Smiths Falls, which is near the cottage I was going to the summer. So I thought I'll go up to the cottage and I'll hand deliver the very first issues pages of a comic I'd ever done. Great. That guarantees no mess ups, right? Well, it
Hmm.
didn't turn out that way because, uh, uh, they're printing the book. I'm waiting to get it. And they gave me a call and they said, "You didn't bring the splash page." And I said, well, I knew if there was one page I brought, it was the splash page. And they insisted, and they'd lost it somewhere. So I had to redo the splash page from scratch. Um, but I got paid for it, so that's okay. And actually, I made it better too. So
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
yeah.
Because I think I remember the book. It was Quadrant or something like that. A Quadrant. The book
Quadrant
was.
Quadrant was Peter's publications.
Oh,
He had
was it?
publications, yeah, called Quadrant,
Yeah.
and I could tell some stories about Peter. Yeah, we first were put out by Aircell, if I'm not mistaken, which was an Ottawa-based company. Later on, we went to Eternity / Malibu, but we were first with Aircell, and yeah, because that was the Ottawa connection there as well. Um, Peter was a fantastic artist, especially with the airbrush. He'd worked in Wally Wood's studio, which I think is very cool. He told me a story once of working in Wally Wood's studio. This was later in Wood's life, and I presume all your viewers know who Wally Wood is. But and Wood was a gun collector, so there was always guns around the studio, rifles, pistols. They were always loaded as well. And Peter told me that once he was working, and he had that little sensation at the back of your neck when you feel that someone's looking at you. And he turned, and Wally Wood had leveled a rifle right at his head. And when Peter turned, Wood broke out in this cackle of laughter. Peter thought perhaps he might get work somewhere else at that point, and left that studio. But yeah, Peter did Quadrant, and it was kind of a soft porn thing, if you remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I think I might still have copies somewhere in my long boxes because I got thousands, well, a couple hundred or more long boxes. So they've got to be hidden in there somewhere, you know.
That is amazing. A couple of hundred long boxes.
Yeah. Well, that's not of that book. Not of that book.
No,
You know,
not
that's-
that book.
you know, no. Yeah, books over the years, DC's Marvels and all that. So,
Yeah.
um,
The interesting thing about Quadrant was he had two versions of it. You would get the newsstand version of it,
Right.
in which case certain key areas of human anatomy were covered by pillars or whatever. But
Mhm.
those things were pasted on and could be peeled away. And if you got the special version from Peter by mail order, he'd peel those off, and he printed another version with nothing left to the imagination. Let's put it that way. So yeah.
yeah, I think I got the X-rated versions because I'm not sure where I bought them from because Harry Kramer at Now and Then Books, he used to be a great supporter of independent books, and he would bring that in. But I might have been up in the Snail, up in Toronto a few times and picked them up there.
Yeah.
But I know Harry. Yeah. So who knows where I can't remember where I got them sometimes, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Same. I'm sure I got mine from Peter, but other than that, I couldn't remember.
You know. So, but yeah, I remember those books well because he used to do the gray airbrush over the lines and stuff. It was a black and white book, and
Yeah, it was. I've always liked working with markers, so I used markers, a bit of airbrush, pencil crayons. I still do work with markers quite a bit. I look at those early pages, and I suppose this is true of every artist, and think, "Oh my God!" But then it means I've improved. Once I was. My daughter is 30 now, but once when she was about 21 years old, we were in a comic book store looking at comics, and she pulls one out and she says, "Dad, is this the comic you worked on when I was a baby?" I said, "Yeah, that's it." So she opens the bag and looks at it. It's a copy of The Adventurers. She goes, "Whoa, Dad! Holy mackerel! It's a good thing you've changed so much. Nobody will know this is you." That's the honesty of a daughter. So
wow. So you went on from the independents, and where did you go? You went into Marvel and stuff like that.
Actually, since then, I did a backup series in Nexus, which was kind of fun. Judah the Hammer backup series, and I did some other independent comics, short stories. But really, since then, it's been more of a, for me, it's been more role-playing games, commercial art. I still, I'm a frequent guest at conventions, and really on the other end of it, like I said, I teach at Max the Mutt Animation Studio. What's the full title? It's a private art school here in Toronto, and I teach students, how to do comics. Primarily, I do layout and inking with the students, and I also teach perspective as well. In recent years, it's taken up much of my time, but I have a couple of projects I'm working on that I hope to land somewhere with somebody. I I've always loved Dracula, the novel. So I've got some concept art done for a graphic novel adaptation of it, doing it the way I would like to see it done. And then I'm also working on a series. It's based on an Icelandic saga called Grettir the Strong, and he was a real person actually who actually existed, supposedly the strongest man who ever lived in Iceland, and this was in the 11th century in Viking times, and
Wow.
a fantastic story as well. It would make a great graphic novel. Um, so yeah, that most of my comics time is in those early days. Although I feel I'm more involved with comics than ever now because of my work at the school. Um,
Mhm.
I'm more immersed in it in some ways, at least. Well, it's good too because you're with kids, you're with young people, and they're showing you things and bringing you things that you would never get otherwise. And hopefully, with my perspective, I'm obviously not a kid anymore. I'm bringing them things that they never would have gotten otherwise.
So when you teach them with the traditional way of like pencil and paper, or do you use computers to do the perspective and then teach them how to do that with a computer?
It's a mix. The courses I teach layout courses. So this is doing pages in year 1 and 2, um, and and then I also teach inking and perspective. All that is done traditionally. Now we have many of our other courses are done digitally. So there's courses just about digital techniques, and there's also courses where you have the option to use either pencil and paper or digital programs. So that's part of it for sure. But the things I teach are all done traditionally.
Oh, good, nice. And now, when you do off the when you go back and do comic books, what's your process for doing out a page? Say if you usually get a script from another artist, writer. Um, so how do you do your process of putting that together? Do you do layouts, or do you go straight to the board?
Well, usually when I work from somebody else's writing, the first thing I do is read the script and say, how in the world am I going to do this? Because that's partly because we all have different ways of telling stories. So I have my way, and somebody else will have their way. They're if the person has any experience and ability, it's totally valid. But it's fascinating to see how different people handle different things. And so it's doing a page is hard enough anyway, even if it's your own script. But I have to spend a bit of time. I'll write notes sometimes. Sometimes I'll break it up. If it's done as a synopsis form, I'll take the script and break it down into where I think pages should go. So what would make a good page that has a central idea to it. If I get a full script, it's easier. Hopefully, also, if you get a full script, um, you have some relationship with the writer, and you can start to say, I think I would like to push this here or expand this. So first, there's just looking at the script, making sure you understand it, what's required. If you need to make changes, is the writer open to that sort of thing. Once
Right.
that's started, I almost always start with a very small thumbnail, you know, 3 inches, 4 inches high, no bigger than that. And I'm just working out uh, basic shapes. If you saw them, you would probably find them you probably wouldn't be able to decipher what I'm actually doing because I'm not drawing details. It's actually just shapes. Um, in fact, I'm trying, as I sometimes say to my students, when you do your layouts, I don't want you to draw. Now, I don't literally mean that, but I mean I don't want you drawing, you know, the bulging biceps of the superhero in your little thumbnail. Just give me the relationship of the shapes. So that's how I begin. Um, I'm also, when I look at the script, I look at a page and say, what's the dominant panel on this page? What is the payoff panel, the one that's most important? It's often, but not always, the largest panel. So when I'm doing my little thumbnail, I'm kind of looking for that. I'm not sort of I'm trying to avoid grids because I find them boring, although there's a place for a gridded page sometimes. But I'm looking for a dominant panel, usually the largest panel, that will give the page some visual focus. And that's my beginning. And I may go through, who knows? I again, rarely with the very first pass end up with a nice workable thumbnail. Something I always say to the students as well is your first conception is usually your worst conception. So give it another try or two. You may have to pluck panels out and rework them. If I feel I've got something working after a while, depending on how well I got it down and how complex the task is, I may either go to the big page or I may go to about a half up size, which is roughly the size of the printed page, and work out some more problems because they need a bit of space to work out. Going to the half up size is good because you can sort of see what it would look like printed too, because it's about the right size. Once I either have what I think is an acceptable conception, either as a thumbnail or as a half up, I'll go to the big page and I don't redraw though. I'll take and photocopy my thumbnail or half up and get it to the size of the full size page and then trace it. I don't say trace, I say, you're transferring your image to the big page. And I know for me and for many, many artists, this is absolutely crucial. So often when you do a small drawing, a rough, a half up, there's a certain energy there that's rather attractive. And then you take it to the big page, and if you're redrawing it, everything stiffens up, everything straightens up. You lose some design relationships that are subtle but key, and suddenly it's not working anymore. So I'll try and keep that energy by just blowing it up to the right size, transferring it to my board that I'm going to work on, and I try and keep it fairly loose because I want to give myself a place where a happy accident can happen, where I can say, oh, what if I do this? That's kind of interesting. I admire certain pencilers who can work extremely tightly right from the beginning. I'm not that person. I like to leave a bit of room so that I can respond to things, and it's only at the final rendering, if I'm inking it, that those final decisions are going to be made. So that's some of my process.
Okay, and you typically use pencils, indie ink, and stuff like that. You still use markers?
I do. I love markers. This is being shown on Facebook, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay, cool. Because if you go on Facebook, and I know you've probably seen them, I post every day. I have a little art challenge I'm doing. It's called a character a day. So my idea was to design a character every day for a year, a new character. And actually, I'm in my 8th year, and I've got 3,175 characters that I've done. And many, to finally answer your question, many of them are done in marker. But I'll mix it up. I do all sorts of things. I know for the Dracula project I have in mind, I want to do it on a type of illustration board called Coquille board, which is beautiful illustration board with a pebbly texture. So I would use markers. I don't like to use traditional pens on it because the pebbly board can catch the nib of the pen and make spatters, which I don't want.
Mm-hmm.
So for the blacks, I'll use markers of various types, and then for the tonal effects, which is why Coquille board is such a beautiful paper, I'll use a black pencil crayon, and it's just it's a beautiful, and it would be perfect for a moody, dark, atmospheric story like Dracula.
So
But
take all the tech.
you'll get incredible textures, effects of mist. You can be very precise if you want, but you can also
Mm-hmm.
do incredible things with clouds and mist and indistinct shapes. I think it suits this type of story to a T.
Nice, nice, nice. And but you haven't used anything else like besides the brushes. Just have you used brushes before and in the ink.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Yeah,
So,
yeah. I just for this one, I think that suits it. For something else, I might do something different. Um, I I actually I do use brushes sometimes and India ink. There's also some very good markers out there. Uh, what are they called again? There's a Japanese marker that produces wonderful thicks and thins that I like to use. Or the G pens are very nice traditional pens. Um, I know in my sketchbook challenge, I try and mix it up and do as many different kinds of rendering techniques as I can because I enjoy that quite a bit.
yeah, I used to do that. I took an art class about probably about 30 years ago, and the teacher I had, he got you to experiment with different stuff. He would get a popsicle stick and you sharpen it, and then you would dip it in India ink, and then you would sketch using just that. You wouldn't use any pencils. You just use the popsicle stick in the ink, and then you would like say he'd have somebody model in the class, and then you just try to draw it with that.
That's very cool. I know when I
Yeah.
went to art school before I became a professional, we did something like that where the instructor had us go out into we were at Sheridan in Brampton. It was all rural around there. And he had us go out and just find a stick or some piece of wood from a tree and take our ink with us and then draw plants with plants. So using a stick or a leaf or whatever. All I can remember about it is that mine was terrible, absolutely terrible. I couldn't wrap my head around it, but I think I'd be better at it today.
Yeah, because you're so used to drawing and stuff like that.
Well, and I'm more open.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
do
I
know an
find that,
artist.
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go finish. No, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
mean, in those days, I thought, okay, I like this tool and I don't like this one. Now I don't
Yeah,
look at it that way. I think I want to try as many tools as I can. I don't want to. I don't want to be stuck on one tool or another tool. Let's try this. Let's try that. Um, so I'm more open to things than I was then.
right. I do know a guy on Facebook. His name is Mike Roth. He uses a lot of sticks and stuff to draw his. He's drawn like Swamp Thing and stuff like that, and he's used sticks
Oh,
to
okay.
draw.
I've got to look for
Yeah,
that then. I'd be intrigued to see that.
yeah. He's been quite busy. He's been doing some work for IDW. Yeah, I think that's yeah the one they're doing the Ninja Turtle Last Ronin, and he's doing that cover for them.
Okay, I'm going to look for that. That's very intriguing.
Yeah, his last name is spelled Rooth, and his first
Okay.
name is Mike.
Yep, I'll write that down. Yeah, that would be nice. See that? I haven't done that in many years. That might be kind of fun to get a stick or a leaf or a plant and see what I can do with it. Redeem
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. If you can find some India ink that's black enough, I bought a bottle of Black Magic, and I couldn't get it black enough.
It's
It just seems to be too watered.
Yeah. Don't you find the quality of art supplies is I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, but it's not what it used to be in some ways.
No, and I had a bottle here that was really good. It was nice and black, and I ended up spilling it.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like,
I hope it wasn't one of those spills where it goes right across the image you're working on.
no, it was on my um, I don't know what to call it, but I bought a thing at Canadian Tire, and it has 3 different shelves on it. You can stack things underneath,
Yep.
and then you got a table up on top, so I can put my bottles and stuff like that. My mannequin that's lost a foot. I've had it for a long time ago.
He's still soldiering on, right?
Yeah, he's still hopping. But I haven't used Indie ink for a while. I've been using a lot of pens and brushes and stuff like that. So just because I can't find the Indie ink.
Do you have a favorite tool?
Favorite tool? Micron. That's I use a lot, and the pencil.
Yeah. Yep.
I used to use blue pencil at one time when I was drawing Max Burger #2, and that's all I used was the blue pencil right through the whole thing. Then I look at my the blue lines underneath because I never erased them. I just send them off to the printer because it was so nice back then. Because back then you could just send it to the printer. That's it. You didn't have to worry about Photoshop or fixing it on the scanner because sometimes the scanner would catch some or you have to clean it off. But back in the old days when we used to send them off to the printers, they photograph them, make a film, and then the plate, but you wouldn't see any of your pencil marks.
Right.
On that, or any other mistakes you made.
That's right. Well, I still do use the blue pencil in my sketchbook anyway, and but those were the days. You send it off and you didn't worry about it. They take care of it on the other end.
Yep, and they would do a darn good job too.
Yes,
with that, most of the time when you get back your artwork, you go, "Wow, that looks really good."
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Did I do that?
Yeah, did I do that? It's a nice feeling.
Yeah. But I looked at my second issue and I'm like looking at the artwork and I'm like, you can see all the squiggles of the blue lines, and I don't know what I did, but I made the image come out of all those scribbles. And I can't do that now for some reason anymore. I guess you get in that kind of groove, and then everything works out with a book.
Yeah, you're rolling, and it goes well, and yeah, that's a nice feeling as well.
Well, when I did that book, I did all the double pages first, and I think I had about 6 or 7 double pages. Did all those on my drafting table, and when I went for a trip to Newfoundland, I took my little I got a little table here. One of these.
Oh yeah, yep.
And you clip it into here, and so I did all those other pages. Some like 30 pages on the road.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Did it like at a friend's house. I was sitting there and doing stippling, and or in a tent. We're sitting in a tent fire, and I was just doing it. Then my eyes were a lot better then. I could see in the dark, almost.
How long would it take you to do a page?
Back then, I'm not sure. It would probably take me maybe a couple of days, maybe, the pencil and ink. I still can do it. I can still do it. I've done a page in 2 days, pencil and inked.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty fast.
Yeah, I got another one here I'm working on. I just did my first 3-point perspective.
Oh my goodness!
And I'm like, oh my god! I'm looking at the Marvel book, how to draw the Marvel way, and I'm like, John doesn't explain it well enough here.
No.
And I'm like, so I had to go online and I had to fill in those spaces that were missing in the book. And I said, okay, that's where it goes. There's a line up on top. The horizon line is up on top. The horizon line at the bottom. And, and I had to figure what part of the building would go to the bottom one and which one would go to the top lines,
Were you doing a view looking down or looking up?
looking down.
Looking down. Okay, so you're high up and you're looking down.
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm inking it now. I've got it partly inked. Um, some details are not done yet, so I'll probably throw some more details in with pencil and in between the inks and stuff. And then I'm trying to figure out shadows. I'm going, where's the sun coming from? Because that's what we all have to think when we're doing comic book art. Where's the light source?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
we're going to make it dramatic, and stuff like that.
Are you happy with the results?
So. I'm like, I might have to redraw it again. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh my goodness! But that's the typical artist feeling, don't you? Don't you find so often? You either halfway through think this is terrible, or you get it done and you think, well, it's okay. And I'm sure you've had this happen where you feel that way, and then you look at it 6 months down the road and you say, actually, you know what? This isn't bad. I was kind of hard on it before,
Yeah. Well, one thing I was really hard on was that first issue of Max Burger. I wanted to represent it again because I'm releasing it sometime this year. So I've been working on it for a long time. I started in 2004. I got most of it done, and then life just changed. I had to do some other work and stuff where I couldn't concentrate on it. So the last, with the quarantine, I was able to work on it and finish it off. So I've got 43 pages from 24 pages originally. It's all done, penciled, inked. I don't know if it matches with the other artwork from what I did in the past. I had to make sure I got Harry Kramer because he's in the book. He passed away quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
And he was originally in my Max Burger book as Max Burger's father. And Harry looked at it and he goes, "That doesn't look like me." So I have a friend that was very close to Harry. He got me a bunch of pictures of Harry, and I used those as references.
Oh, okay.
And then I brought it up to him, and I showed Dave. I said, "Dave, what do you think?" He says, "That really looks like Harry." So and that made me feel good that I captured his likeness.
Yeah, like a tribute almost.
Yeah. So I'll put a little bit of thing in the book saying, this is dedicated to Harry Kramer, the first independent. I guess he is the first independent comic book store in North America.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a debate about somebody in the States. I forget who it is, but he started his store in, I think, 72,
okay.
I think, or 73. So he was the first comic book store that ever opened.
My goodness, I did not know that.
Yeah. But he never took care of himself, and it's too bad. He was supposed to exercise and stuff like that, and not take a cab. He only lived 6 blocks away from the store.
My goodness me.
And he wouldn't walk. He'd take a cab. Yeah.
Oh,
and then
my.
people come into the store and talk to him, and he's supposed to go out for lunch. He's supposed to have a certain set time for lunch and supper and stuff. Yeah. And people would come in the store and start conversation with him, and then he'd forget the time he was supposed to leave, and then he'd miss his supper or lunchtime, and he'd have to eat later, and that was hard on his body, and he had all that weight on him. His mother passed away as he lived with his mom, and she took care of him really well, and she was making sure he was being fed properly. But when she passed away, he just didn't do it. And then that friend that I showed my artwork to, he was living with him for a while, and he found Harry the next morning. He was working on a collection, and that's when he passed away in the middle of doing the collection.
Well, it's too bad because that stuff adds up. But I mean, at least he passed away doing something he loved, you could say.
Yeah. And but he a lot of people remember him. There's even an award, I think, for Harry, Harry Kramer Award. So that's nice.
With the pages you're doing, reworking that issue, are you finding a huge difference between your earlier work and your work of today?
Well, when I was doing it in 2004, it was looking like my stuff in my issue 2. I was using a lot of brush in that one and Indie ink. But this one I'm using more microns and markers to fill in the blacks. I've got one of those huge, big, thick markers. They're let me get it. I have one. This is what I'm using to. Oops, we'll get it over here.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a Faber Castell.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm using that to fill all my blacks. I like to use Indie ink. I've got a whole bunch of brushes. I've got this one that has a bamboo base on it, and when I'm doing a horror part of the story, because if there's Max Burger and we have the Mad Burger, and every time I do the Mad Burger, all the panels have to be jagged because it's Max has got the straight. Yeah, it's crazy. Mad Burger is like nuts and crazy, and so if people catch that on when they're looking through the book and say the panels are rippled, why are they rippled? That's because we're in his world,
Yeah, we're in his mental state almost, right?
Yes, yeah, and the world is just falling apart because he's around.
Right.
But I use this one brush just to get those lines, those wiggly lines. But I don't use it now. I use a different marker, and I'll just scribble my hands down like that.
Yeah. So do you find you prefer the markers over the brushes now?
They're a little cleaner.
Yes.
Than the brushes.
Yeah.
When I'm done, I'm usually looking at my fingers and going, "Well, look at that! I got black." Then I can show people and say, "Look, I'm actually working. See, this is where I work."
This proves that I'm an artist.
Yeah. And but no, I do like the markers. They dry pretty fast. I don't know how they don't look. I don't think they look as good when you scan them in. The blacks, they don't look as black. So I find I have to go in when I scan. I'll have to go in and sometimes I'll paint it black. I know there's techniques or some to make them darker, but I find a lot of the lines get darker too and thicker.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. So because I just did a page just recently. This is a page I did recently.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so you use some fairly heavy black spotting.
Yeah, I like a lot of blacks. I don't know why, but and it's in the sewer, so you got.
Yeah, do you have an artist who's particularly influenced you?
Let's see. Well, George Perez, but he doesn't use a lot of blacks.
No, he doesn't.
It could be Dave, Dave Sim.
Yeah.
Reading a lot of his books, and maybe the Ninja Turtle guys too. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Because I think they used a lot of blacks in the original run of the Turtles.
Yeah, they did, and Dave Sim uses a lot of blacks as well. He's a fabulous black spotter.
Yeah.
So when you work, do you, sometimes when I'm doing my work in my sketchbook, which is just for me, I'm going to I want to hit a certain look. So maybe I'll work like so-and-so today, or maybe I'll try and match something Charles Vest did, or, that sort of thing. And that's another way to kind of push me out of what I would normally do. Do you ever do things like that?
No, I never think of that when I'm doing that. I don't think I'm, well, if I'm drawing, sometimes I'll think if I'm going to put details in it, I may think George Perez. I did a scene for the redraw of issue 1. Another reason why I went and redrew issue 1 was because there was a scene where Max, somebody has planted a bomb in Max's car, and it blows up. And I didn't shoot too much of Max's car because back then there was no internet, and I knew Max drove an old car from the 1930s, but I didn't really have the references. I end up buying a model cast car of it's a 1931 Peerless that Max drives, so I can pick up the model and rotate it. I can take pictures of it. I can use the light table to trace the car a little bit to give me at least a framework, and then I can put the details in and stuff like that. But there was a bridge that he went over because this story takes place in Ottawa, and he goes over this bridge. And I went to Ottawa when did I go to Ottawa? I think it was 1974. I went to Ottawa. We went as a class trip, and that's probably why it influenced me to do the story in Ottawa. And we drove across the Alexandria Bridge, and I'm thinking, like, this is a cool bridge, but I can't remember how to draw it. So I didn't draw any detail of. You could see a little bit of metal in the frame of the first original drawings, and then when I went to redraw it, I found a beautiful picture on the internet. It must have been somebody in a canoe, and they shot up at towards the bridge, and so I drew the bridge, and I had the car flying off the bridge.
Wow!
And in the water, there was a whole bunch of icicles or icebergs, kind of thing, but they all looked like headstones.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
And it was like millions of these things. I was like, that's when I was thinking George Perez, gonna like throw in the detail, you know?
Yeah, that would be right up his alley.
Yeah, but he's one of my favorite artists. Frank Miller has become some of favorite of mine too. He uses a lot of black.
Yeah, he's a great black spotter. You know.
Yeah, and then you look at his stuff and you're going, well, he's inferring this stuff too. You know, instead of a black shadow, it's the silhouette is in white with a black background or something like that. You know, and I was going like, I did that stuff in this art class I took. I'm like, I can do that.
Exactly. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe he was influenced by you.
Who knows? Because I think Max came out before. I think Max came out before Sin City.
Okay, there you go.
Because I think it was not in the 90s, wasn't it? Sin City.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Max Berger came out in '89, so and 1990. So.
Yeah. So there's a. Historically, you're first.
Yep, I am. Yeah. So who are your influences in comic books?
Comics, there's lots, but really I would say the primary one would be Jack Kirby. You know, I remember as a kid, I didn't. Of course, in those days, comic books weren't signed, so I had no idea who was who. But I would read, and I started. This dates me a little bit here, but the first Jack Kirby comics I saw were the pre-superhero Marvel stuff, the monster comics, and I just, you know, and I was a kid, but I knew there was something for me anyway. There was something different about that artist, and I really liked it. I even probably said to some of my friends, "Oh, this artist is really good," and they didn't care about any of that. They just wanted to read the comics. But I could. You know, and who knows why you can do this, but I could identify the styles, and I knew, okay, didn't have names, but I knew that artist was really special. I actually bought Fantastic Four #1 when I was a kid, and I still have it, and I knew it was that same artist. And then eventually you see credits, and you know it's this guy called Kirby. You know, as a kid, I loved the monsters he drew. Did great creatures and stuff. That was cool. And you get a bit older and you enjoy the costumes and all the different characters, and you enjoy his fight scenes and his action scenes. They're really good. And as I got older, I just found more and more ways to like Kirby, and I until I finally thought to myself, you like his characters. He's a good storyteller. His action stuff, his Kirby tech, the machinery, and I thought there's something else still here. What is it? And it's his ability to tell stories. He is just a brilliant designer and storyteller, and he tells them in a way that's different and better than anyone else. So it's Jack Kirby. I mean, I even went through a phase, and I think we all go through this, where you draw a lot like the artist you like, and that was good because I learned some things from it. I looked at my figures and said, what's missing? Why they don't have the power and energy of Jack Kirby's figures, and they still don't, but they're a lot better. And so you go through that phase of really being influenced strongly. Now my work is a mix of different things, but Kirby's the first big one and still the biggest one.
Yeah.
Liked Ditko a lot, his early
Yep.
Spider-Man stuff. I don't see any real direct influence in my work, but I really like Ditko's work. Um, so that's early. I'm a little kid when I'm reading this kind of stuff. Um, let's see. Let's go up the ladder a bit. Um, I don't know if you would know this artist. He's not a comic book guy, but he's a guy named Virgil Finlay, who is an illustrator. Just love his work. Pen and ink, white on black, coquille board, scraper board, all combined in one image. It's not that I've ever drawn from Virgil Finlay, but his works really influenced me. Frank Frazetta, there's another one.
Yeah.
That would have come a little bit after Kirby and Ditko. He's another artist I've drawn from a lot because I'd look at his figures and say, okay, what is he doing that I'm not doing that is making his figures have so much energy? And I still look at Frazetta today quite a bit. I find I have to re-buy all my Frazetta books every few years because I go through them and look at them so often. They get pretty beaten up and dog-eared. So there's another big influence right there.
I met his wife at I think it was either in Atlanta or San Diego,
Ah,
and she came over and talked to me.
yeah. What was she
And
like?
she was a nice woman.
Yeah.
Didn't talk to her too long. She just came over and looked at my stuff, and she says, you're the new artists that are coming in, and she told me who she was,
That's very
but
cool.
I never got to meet him. I didn't. I guess he was over signing some books and stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's too bad. That would have been something to meet him.
yeah.
I had a
Um,
chance to meet Kirby once. I was at San Diego, and this
mhm.
would probably have been the year or two before he died. So he was there, and every time I went to his table, it was packed, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him. And then the last day of the con, I actually had my bags with me because I was heading to the airport, and I was walking through one last time, and I thought I got to try and get even just to shake Kirby's hand. And so I went over to his table, and there was nobody there but Kirby. So for 15 minutes, I had Jack Kirby all to myself. It was really cool. I have I can't really remember what was said because I was so starstruck. But I do remember people said to me, when you meet Kirby, he's going to make you feel like you were his oldest friend. And right away, he put me completely at ease, just a regular guy, And I remember he did say at one point, whatever you do as an artist, be yourself. You know, that's the things I most remember about meeting Kirby. That was cool.
Nice. I met Stan Lee once.
Oh yeah, did you get a chance to talk to him?
Yeah, I talked to him. He was walking around the convention center.
Oh my goodness.
It was the early days of Fen Expo or something. I forget what building they were in. They weren't in the Holiday Inn because I remember I went to one convention in Toronto that was at a Holiday Inn or something.
Yeah.
But this one, he was walking around, and I remember these kids. They wanted to get an autograph by Stan Lee, but they wanted him to sign it Jim Lee. So must have been about when Jim Lee was doing the X-Men and stuff.
Yeah.
So I went over and I met him. I talked to him, shook his hand, and I'm like, my God, what a grip on this guy.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I couldn't usually you could tell you judge somebody by their handshake, you know.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh my God, he's taking my hand off my arm.
Grip. He's a pretty big, tall guy, right?
Yeah. He was really nice, you know. And then I came by to him when he had his table because he didn't want to talk too long. He said, well, come by the table or something. So I came by. I had some books to sign. I had a Spider-Man, what was it, 7 or 8 I had. I had the robot on the cover.
Oh, yeah. That green robot.
I bought it. Yeah, it was the fight with Flash Thompson.
Yep.
And I bought it in Newfoundland for I think $30 at the time. That was in the very early 80s. I ended up selling that, and I regretted that because Stan Lee signed it, and I didn't get very much money for it. I only got $2 more than what I paid for it. It wasn't a mint book, you know. I had some tape on it and stuff like that, but it looked in pretty good shape, you know.
Yeah.
And I had a Daredevil #1, and I had one of a couple of. What's going on here? Losing. Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, all of a sudden everything starts spinning around.
Yeah, just a bit, but we're back, I think.
Oh, that's good. But anyway, the Marvel books, they had the reprints of the Marvel comics. I had those signed by him.
Those are a lot of very valuable books.
Yeah, but I wish I kept the Amazing Spider-Man and the Daredevil. Mm-hmm. I was working with a guy in Montreal doing some artwork for me. I wanted to go into superhero books. I've got a bunch of superhero books I created. When Captain Canuck came out, I got an issue of #3. George Freeman's artwork blew me away.
Oh, he's
the paper. Did you remember that paper that Richard Connolly put on there? It was like, wow, real fancy paper. Yep. Like you're so used to the newsprint, and the colors on that just popped. And that was my. They kind of influenced me to do comic books.
Oh, okay. So that was the thing that got you to do comics.
Yeah, but I've been reading comics all my life, you know, since I was maybe 4 or 5 or whatever. I don't remember what my first book was, but when Captain Canuck came out, I think it was an identity thing, because reading all those American books, I almost thought I was American, and all of a sudden, there's a Canadian comic book. Wow! This is neat. He's wearing the red and white, you know? And then there was a thing in the back about Johnny Canuck and Havana.
Yeah.
The Great Canadian Comic Book. He's got that book. And so I got it from the library, but I'm like, I'm researching all this stuff on comic book, like the Canadian comic books and all that. And then I think that's what drove me into doing comic books, because I started doing my own then. I thought comic books were the size, they were drawn on the size they were printed. Right. So I get a comic book and I get an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and then I would rule it around, and then I would cut it smaller, and then I would draw my comic book in that, and then I would staple it together or something like that. And I was going to go and I was looking at photocopying, because there was I lived in Cambridge, section called Preston, and on our main highway, Highway 24, there was a place called Copycats, and they were using photocopiers. And this is back in the late 70s. So I was like, oh, this is neat. You know, you can put your thing on the glass, and you can reproduce this stuff. You know, and I was thinking of doing a bunch of my own little comic books and print them that way, but I never got to that point. We ended up moving down east, and but I still continue with the comic books and stuff like that. You know.
Yeah, once you love it, you don't lose it. You stick with it one way or another, right?
Yeah, it either calls you back. It seems like for me, it's calling me all the time and saying, "Look, you got to get out and produce these pages, and you got stories."
You work with a collaborator, or is it all you?
Well, the Max Berger stuff is all me.
Yeah.
But the other stories I'm working on, I'm working with other people. I've actually doing the North Shield book I'm doing. I've worked with 3 people so far. I think it was 3 or 4. Maybe it's 4. There was a guy in Hamilton, a guy named Ron Gravel. He got the whole book done, except for I think a few pages. So I was going to try to fix it together so I could print it. And then I met another guy from Montreal, which we talked me into redrawing that book again. I had to go back and I rewrote it, which I made it longer for some stupid reason. It was 40 pages. Then it became 60 pages. And then he wanted ownership of the character and everything, and I'm like, well, I designed the costume and all this stuff, and I said, well, the demands that you're putting on me, you want to write it, and he's come from a horror. He did a book of his own. It was kind of in a horror vein, and I'm like going, I don't want to see my character get into that. He's supposed to be lighthearted. He's supposed to be sort of like Captain Canuck, good, wholesome. It's not dark. It's not going to be bloody and arms coming off and stuff like that. And this is where this guy would have done it. So we ended up having a dispute, and I left him, and I paid him for his work. It's what he was doing, the pencils, inks,
Yep.
Up maybe for the last 25 pages because we were starting to get into that argument kind of thing. And I just walked away from him, and he tried to publish it on his own. And then I had another guy from Toronto that worked on it. I was trying to raise the money through Kickstarter, and I couldn't get the funding for it to pay him. I ended up working at a factory for a while, which I hate factories. And have you ever worked in a factory in between doing art and stuff?
Oh yeah. Yep. All kinds of factories.
You sound real excited about that.
Well, let's put it this way, because you've done it. You know that after you've done it, you don't want to do that again.
Yeah, it's just like it's a conveyor kind of thing, and it's just like a machine, and you're putting parts down and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't know what's going to happen at these jobs. Some could happen to the machine. I worked at one place that this one machine I worked on dripped oil from the top all day, and it would get on your hair, and you'd leave, and your clothes would be soaking of oil in your hair and stuff like that. And I just hated just coming back the next day.
Yeah, you're going to face that again another day. Not much fun.
And the art is more fun doing that kind of stuff,
Absolutely. Yeah. I can say I've done it, and I don't want to do it again. Too old to do it anyway,
Oh yeah, I'm getting to the age I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to get back and work on this and get this stuff done.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have a cool job.
I will say the
Hmm?
hardest job I've ever done was being a moving man. That was a summer job, and so you have to move a house every single day, and that was a killer. That one, worse than any factory job. That's over with
Yeah,
too. I'm too old.
yeah, yeah. Well, you got the teaching job, so that's good, and that's a reliable job, so you don't have to worry about the bills and stuff like that. That's
Yeah,
why most of us
yeah,
take those jobs because we need the money to be able to keep continuing our stuff.
yeah. I mean, the teaching job. I'm very lucky because it's 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 a job and it's reliable, but it's also doing something I really enjoy, talking about things I really enjoy, and because it's a private school and the students are often paying for it themselves. They're you don't have to motivate people. These are very motivated people. They're a joy to work with. They're hardworking and creative and determined, and you don't have discipline issues. You're just surrounded by creative people, so it's very fulfilling. Very fulfilling. I'm very lucky, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, it sounds like a fulfilling job. Like I was telling Jeff Burden yesterday that we were talking about. He goes around and talks to students other than what you do. He's a school teacher, but his character is. I don't know if you ever heard of Jeff Burden. He does a book called The War Man.
Nope, don't know that one.
No, you never heard that one?
No.
It's he's kind of based it on like Starman a bit.
Hmm.
His character, and his character looks like him. He's got the big
Okay.
old beard and the hair and stuff like that. He teaches history, and so he encourages his students to read comic books and stuff, and he brings them in and stuff like that. So he's done his own line of comic books with
Oh,
himself.
okay.
So the character carries this wooden staff with a globe. It looks like Earth on the stick, and it gives him powers. He can fly and all kinds of stuff. And he was saying he goes around to schools in the Saskatchewan area
Hmm.
and talks to students and talking about how excited they get when he comes in. He comes in full character with his costume on and his staff, and he'll talk to him about comic books. And but he says they get really excited. They have really thoughtful questions for him, you know. And I did something like that back in the '90s. I went to Newfoundland for I think it was a month, and I was staying at a friend's place. And she says, my son is going to the school here in town, and they'd like you to come up and talk to them about comic books. So I came up and I talked to a bunch of kids in a couple of grades, and I got this package one day with artwork from Max. They remember what Max looked like, and the Mad Burger and stuff like that, because I did little, sketches and stuff.
Hmm.
They give me an easel to draw on, and I was showing these kids, what they look like and how I would draw and stuff like that. But they were so excited about it, and they had these questions. I was like going, "How old are you, kid?" Because when I was that age, I never thought of those kind of questions.
Yeah, it's a
But
lot of fun, isn't it? Working with
yeah,
kids, and
yeah,
especially because you can draw and you can work with them and they can draw. You know, it's I just I love doing that kind of thing. I get to do it as a job, and I sometimes do workshops at high schools or whatever. Um, it's their enthusiasm, and I find if you get the right group anyway, they really want to learn, and you can't ask for anything more than that. You know.
yeah. You just show up, and once you show them the stuff, they're quite excited because they don't know the process of doing artwork. They as far as we know, they might think that it's done by machines.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I like about teaching kids or adults for that matter is when sometimes I think people think it's this doing art is a mystery. It just kind of happens. But if you show them that there are techniques and ways to do things and you can build on those techniques, and I always say to my students, I don't use the word talent, I use skill. This is a skill that you can learn. And once you show people that it's a skill, I just see people like, wow, I mean, I can do this. It's not like those talented people over there do it, but I'll never do it. No, I've learned some techniques that I can now take away and draw better faces or better bodies or whatever. Um, and that's the other neat thing is to open that up to people and say, it's not a mystery. You can learn to do this. It's a teachable skill.
Yeah, because it's not something that you're born with that you can do. It takes time to develop the way of drawing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, you
because
can, if I look at my work when I was 12 or 22 or 32 or whatever, I mean, you can see immense changes. And it's one of the nice things about being an artist too. You don't, as long as you're reasonably healthy, you can keep improving for your whole life, you know?
yeah, well, you pick up different influences too from different people who taught you. Like I went to that art class in Open Door. It's called. It's a school for adults, and the teacher I had, he taught us a lot about stippling and cross hatching, and I used a lot of cross hatching in that in my first Max Burger book because I got it from him.
Mm, yeah, exactly.
And I don't think I've seen too many people in the time in the black and white boom using a lot of cross hatching in the books. There's a lot of solid blacks.
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure if Dave. I don't know if Dave used it. I know Gerhard uses it. Gerhard does all of it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
he's a fantastic inker.
I know. I talked to him last year at Richard's Cumley's convention. So I said to Gerhard, I said, "What does Dave do when you're drawing the backgrounds and stuff?
Mm.
Does he draw sort of a shape for you or something?" He said, "No. If he wants me to draw a table, he'll draw a line down here, and then he says I rendered everything else. He'll make that table look like a table."
That is amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought there'd be a little more that he would, he'd rough it out, and then Gerhard would
Yeah.
really flesh it out. But no, it's just a couple of lines,
Yeah.
and that's it. My
Yeah, I
goodness.
think Dave just put the figure there and then put a line through it saying this is a table, just a straight line, and then line down for the leg of the table, and then that's it. You go and render it from there.
Well, I gained a lot. I respect him a lot, but I even have more respect for him now for being able to do that,
Yeah.
to flesh it out because it's beautiful, beautiful work.
Oh yeah, I'm like it must take hours to do all that hatching on those buildings. Like that's the Church and State cover for the phone books. You look at the hatching on that, I'm like going, wow.
Yeah.
Look at that,
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautifully precise and controlled, without being stiff. It's a really tough thing to do. It's beautiful stuff.
Yeah. And it seemed to blend in with Dave's characters too.
Yeah.
His line work kind of reflected off Gerhard's,
Yeah, and the thing is, of course, that Dave is just an unbelievable layout artist. His layouts, his designs for the pages, it's an interesting combination because you get his fabulous layouts, and then you combine it with Gerhard's really precise inking, and and also they're very good with. Now, what about I find they do very good work with sound effects. Is that a mix of both of them? Is that mostly Dave? Is it Gerhard? Do you know?
I don't know. No. Maybe it could be Dave.
Hmm. Yeah, because there's a lot of really good work with sound effects I find in those comics. It's really nice.
If I happen to run into Dave, I'll ask him.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
I do see him in Kitchener every once in a while. He doesn't draw anymore. He's got that wrist problem. What is it called? I can't remember what that. How do you pronounce that? For your, it's, when you're typing too much and stuff, and you get that wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to wear a brace on his hand.
My goodness.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
He used to come into a coffee shop that I regularly go in every once in a while. I don't see him there all the time, but you don't go in there anymore because the quarantine thing,
Yeah.
They got it all closed down. But seen him last year. He had Service in Hell he was doing, but he wasn't drawing any of the stuff. He just takes stuff from Cerberus from the books he already drew, and then cut it out and then paste it in. He had somebody else do the backgrounds, and it looked like some kind of a Bible like drawing kind of thing. And he just pastes Cerberus in the panels.
Well, that's a neat solution. I mean, to think of not being able to draw anymore, that's a difficult thing. That must be so hard for him.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd just be going like, why would I want to be photocopy my work and then just cutting it out and putting it into a different scene?
Yeah.
I'd either hire somebody to draw that for me. If I could still have the stories running in through my head and I needed to tell them, then I'd get somebody else to draw for me if I couldn't do that,
Yeah, because you'd still have the stories. You just need somebody to put them down for you,
Yeah, maybe Dave is just a little worried about it because it's not his work and it's...
Yeah, won't capture the same thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But we're lucky. We can both still draw, so we're okay.
Yes, we can. We got somebody... Oh, we got somebody here mentioning what it is. Tendonitis? This guy has.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, Dorothy says that's what it is.
Tendonitis.
Yeah, that's what he said it was. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why he's got to wear a brace on his wrist.
Yeah.
And
never had those problems. I hope I never do.
Well, I ended up having some gout. Well, I had a cyst on my finger, and I was kind of worried about it. And it was right on my drawing finger, right hand. And so I went into the doctor. One doctor said, well, I wouldn't mess with a hand because you don't know what could go wrong. And I was kind of worried about it. And I wanted to find out what it was. Nobody could give me an answer. So I got sent off to a doctor to get it drained because we thought it was a cyst. And it turned out to be a gout related. And when they stuck the needle in, it aggravated my gout. And so we went into the hospital. It turned my finger red. They removed the cyst, sewed me back up. And I think about a week or two later, the gout started kicking in. And gout is acid. It's like the aliens. And it started eating through the stitches.
Oh, my goodness me.
So I had to go back in and have surgery done to reattach the muscle because it ate through the muscle of my finger. So here's what my finger looks like.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, so I can't straighten it out. But it still works for the penciling.
Now, did it change your drawing at all?
Not really.
Not really, eh?
No. I still hold the pencil in the same way. I think this is with the finger, because the finger is bent down here.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me that control for the pencil.
Yeah, it's very similar to the way you would draw anyway, right?
Yeah. So I said, thank God it didn't take that away,
Yeah.
Because I would have to learn how to draw with my left hand. And everything would have been backwards.
That would be...
Because it takes more thinking for me, because I've tried to draw with my left hand. And it takes more physical energy.
Yes.
Because I got to, when I draw with the right hand, there's no thinking, in a way. I know what the image is, but it's there, and it just comes automatically. But if I do the left, I'm going, okay, I got to turn it this way. I got to take it down this way. And it doesn't come out right anyway, so...
Yeah, with your left hand, with your right hand, it happens because you've been using your right hand all your life. It's much more natural. With the left hand, you have to make it happen. It's draining to make it happen. Yeah.
But I think it can be done, because I've heard people saying that there's a friend of mine that worked at a comic book store in Kitchener looking for heroes, and he was into comic books, but he wasn't getting anywhere with it, so he went into painting. And he was saying he trained his left arm and hand to draw. So now he can go right or left whenever he wanted. I said, wow. Well, that's cool. I said, you can pencil with one hand and ink with the other one.
That I would like to see.
Well, that would be, just think of the production you'd be able to get done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Start with that, you get the...
As long as you don't get all mixed up. But
Yeah, and then you'd be messed up, ink all
yeah.
over your hands.
Well, I read that Frazetta, um, I guess I don't know, in his 50s or something like that. He had health problems, and they couldn't
Mhm.
identify what it was. He lost it. Eventually, he was down to like 110 pounds. The doctors thought he was going to die, and to make a long story short, they eventually traced it down to thyroid problems, and they were able to address them, and he recovered his health. But then this illness had taken so much out of his body, he had a series of heart attacks, and he basically lost the use of his right hand. So he taught himself to draw or and paint again with his left, and he did some, incredible paintings later in his life that are just as good as anything he ever did, because he was able to teach himself to draw with his left hand, which I think is
Wow.
amazing.
Was he able to keep that style that he had before?
Yeah,
Like you could tell it was his work.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Some
Well,
really,
that's good.
really, really good work. Yeah.
Wow. Maybe I should start practicing with my left.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh my. When I was younger,
Yeah.
I woke up one morning and I had a very sore arm. I thought I'd hurt it playing baseball.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized that my thumb and forefinger couldn't bend anymore. And it was really affected my ability to draw. And in the long run, I think it was good because I developed a new grip and made it much
Yep.
more gestural. But I went to the
Yep.
doctor and they tested me and they said, well, we are not sure, but it's probably one of two things. Either your nerves have been cut, in which case you'll never get that back, or they've been smashed, in which case it'll take about a year for your nerves to regenerate. And I said, well, can we find out? And the doctor said, sure, we'll just cut your arm open from the shoulder to the wrist, and then we can find out. And I said, no, let's not do that. So, um, and then about a year later, I woke up and literally from one night to the next morning, my fingers could bend again. So it was obviously smashed. Um,
Wow.
but that was my as close as I've gotten to something like that. And again, because I had to develop this new grip, my work got looser and more gestural. I've always had a problem with stiffness, so in
Yeah.
some ways that wasn't a bad thing.
Well, I heard that the same thing happened to JR,
Hmm.
John Ramota Jr. And some happened to his hand. I read or seen in a video or some, and that's why he draws differently now. If you look at his
Hmm.
style, he says, forget how he says he draws. He draws like this now when he's doing stuff.
Okay, that's it. I didn't know he'd had a hand injury.
Yeah, because I was looking
And
at his earlier stuff, his Spider-Man stuff, and the stuff he's doing now looks way different.
different,
You can
good or different, just different.
just different.
Hmm.
You can tell it's him drawing it, but it just doesn't look like his. I know we improve as we get with more we draw and stuff like that, but his just looked differently. Something just happened.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I know Bernie Wrightson had issues with his hand after doing the Frankenstein pieces, and I always felt that when I looked at his work after that, it was never quite the same again. It looked good. I would have, if I didn't know, I'd say that's a guy who's doing work that looks like Bernie Wrightson, but it's not Wrightson. But it was Wrightson. I always felt it was never quite as good again, and that was carpal tunnel syndrome, I think. Somebody may correct me
Oh,
on that one, but yeah.
could it be from all the lines that he put into the work? Because there was a lot of lines in that and those drawings, as I recall.
Yeah, very precise, very detailed work, incredible work, fantastic work, but it takes a toll, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And he's probably spending hours and hours and hours on it, not taking breaks. Maybe.
Yeah, and I'm guessing because I've seen Wrightson draw a couple of times, and he was anyway, very very slow. So he's not a speed demon. I know it would take him a long time to do anything that precise, and even just watching him pencil, he's one of the he's very deliberate, I guess. Slow is not a good word, but he really is very careful, takes his time, One of the most deliberate artists I've ever seen. So I'm sure he was spending ages and ages and ages at his drawing table.
You know, but, I never spend a lot of. I'm not really slow with the drawings unless it's something I'm not concrete in my mind. I don't know if you're like that too. If you're kind of questioning yourself on a drawing, and you go, you don't feel that layout is proper, but you need to get it done,
Yeah.
and then you do it, and it's like, I think I should tear that up and start again. You know, but I find if I'm really, it's here in the head, and then I can visualize it really well. It will come out almost exactly the way I see it here.
Yeah, sometimes you see it, you just see it perfectly, and it comes pouring out as easy as pie. And other times you have to work hard. You have to sculpt it and shape it. And I if I'm doing a professional assignment, it's one of those things where you have a deadline, so it doesn't matter if you're not crazy about it. When you're halfway through, you've got to finish it. And um, part of my character a day sketchbook thing is if I start pencil the character, if I start to render it in pen and ink or marker or whatever, I can't stop and say, "Oh, I don't like it. I've got to start again." I have to finish it, no matter how much I hate it, because it's a good discipline to say, "Okay, it's maybe not the best thing you've ever done, but how good can you make it now?"
Yeah.
Given that you're not crazy about it, don't give up on it. Keep fighting it.
So when you do your characters sketches, do you do stick figure first? Do you do kind of like a skeleton, like a line with a head, and then you put the skull or the spine going down, and then a little.
Yeah, I'll do something like that. It depends. I again, like you say, sometimes you have a really good mental image. So if I have a really good mental image, my little rough will be very sketchy. Just not a lot of lines, because I like to do a lot of work right in the inks. Other times it's more difficult, so I'll have to spend more time with the little skeletal figure, or glass mannequin, whatever you want to call it. It all
Yeah.
depends. Some days I'm sure you have the same thing. Some days you feel good and everything just flows, and other days it's a bit of a struggle. You feel like, okay, I've forgotten how to draw today. I don't know what's happened, but today is not working. So
Yeah.
that depends. But I tend to. Um, I've been tending to try and do less of the preliminaries and see how much I can do in the inks, because it pushes me a little bit. It's a little tougher.
Right. Right. Now you do push yourself when you don't feel like you want to draw, because I know Dave Sim. He used to go. It's a job. I have to go there from 9 to 5,
Yeah.
and leave it after it's done. So do you sit there, no matter how you feel, and go, "This is a 9 to 5 job. I got to go and do it," or "I'm just an artist. I'll come back and do it whenever I feel like it."
Well, I think I'm more on the Dave Sim end, because it's I mean, even this character a day, that's why I tell everybody I meet about it, so that everybody who knows me knows, and they'll say, "Oh, how's your character a day coming? What number are you at?" Because that way I can't crap out. Let's say tonight I'll probably do a character. I'm going to say, "No, I'm not going to watch TV. I'm going to do a character tonight. I've got to. Otherwise I haven't got one done today." And it's
Yeah.
it's like having a job as an illustrator or comic book artist. If you wait until you're inspired, you're going to have a hard time. Some days you're not going to be inspired. Okay, you still have to produce that day. And I know
Yeah.
that some drawings, illustrations I've done, or my characters, um, you don't feel like doing it, and then you do it, and it actually comes out okay. So it's a little lesson in perseverance, and stick to it. You may be surprised with what you get.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get really good things. So some of my favorite characters have come on a night where I don't feel like doing it, but I think, well, just do something, get something done, start. You make some lines, and it suggests something. Oh, that's interesting, and now it starts to go. So
Well,
don't quit.
well, what I find for me, I've got a little. I went to the Dollarama and I picked up a little whiteboard, and I got it up just above me from my computer. I can't see when I'm working on because you can see my drafting table there.
Mm-hmm.
So I have it up there, and I'll write down what I'm doing. So if I got interviews with people on YouTube, I'll put it up there. But usually I'll put up there draw.
That's good.
And just to remind me that I got to do it. So when I go up and I draw, I'll put a little check mark. I can only do it in the mornings now. I find more in the afternoons and evenings. I can't draw that much anymore. When I was younger, in my 20s, I used to work at a factory job driving a stacker machine. It's kind of like a lift fork, but the forks are in the back, and you go up with your cargo and stuff. And I would come home, and I would sit. I used to drink pop. I used to drink 6 cans of pop a day and a 2-liter. And I'd have the drafting table. I have it wasn't 40-year-old TV then, but it was one of those old wooden console TVs. I still have it, and I like it because it gives me, it gives me some kind of comfort when I'm drawing. I got some kind of background. That's another question to ask you. Do you have any background music going on, or TV or anything while you're drawing?
Yeah, I usually have something. Now, if I'm designing, so if I'm going to design a page, or if I'm doing an illustration, and the designing is the thinking process, I'll put some music on. Once I'm going to ink it, then it's a different kind of procedure. So I might put on a movie or a TV show or something I've already watched before, so that I don't have to look at it because I already know it. But if there's a good scene, I can just watch for a second or two and then return to my drawing. If there's something new that I've never seen, I won't put that on because I'll be tugged away and want to watch the movie or the TV show. So it's usually things I've already watched that I really like, and it just gives me a bit of, or I'll listen to some podcasts too, maybe when I'm inking. But when I'm designing, it's got to be music. The other thing is I don't like working in silence. I do like to have some music or podcast or TV show on. Most people I know seem to like that better as well. Can't work in silence. That's tough.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Well, that's the same with me. I've got to throw in some I'm familiar with. I've watched a million times, and there's always a good scene in it that you got to watch it again anyway, like you said. My stuff is usually Hardcastle McCormick or The Greatest American Hero. It's got to be The Greatest American Hero is superhero, so I'll throw that in, or a Hardcastle McCormick, or maybe a Superman movie or something like that.
Yeah.
And you've got that John Williams music in the background too. So if you're doing an uplifting character in your drawing, that kind of helps too,
Yeah, exactly. It's inspirational. The music also cues you in. Okay, here's the important scene I want to watch, and then you get back to your drawing and you go from there. Yeah.
And I've done that with, like, if I'm drawing the Mad Burger or some, I'll put on some like the Imperial March in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, because that's Darth Vader, that's evil. Mad Burger's evil. He's crazy. So that gets you into the mood when you're inking, you're making your darker blacks and stuff like that, Yeah,
it's got to be something that, at least kind of goes with what you're doing. Otherwise, you're fighting yourself a bit,
Well, if you put Metallica on and you're doing a happy scene where somebody's walking through a field of flowers, that's you're going to be started drawing other things in there that look scary.
Yeah, although it's funny, because I agree, I wouldn't do that either. If I wanted to draw a field of flowers, I wouldn't have Metallica. But I have students who, and they'll do something like a cute pair of kids, and they're listening to the heaviest heavy metal going. But for them, it works, where everybody's got a different combination. So I'll never tell anybody else what to listen to. It's very personal.
Yeah, because it's whatever you connect with it,
Yeah, exactly.
That helps you to draw better, to put you in that mood.
Yeah.
You know, and whatever puts you in a mood, if the heavy metal stuff puts you in mood, then listen to it.
Yeah, it's whatever works for you, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody listens to disco.
Well, just thinking of what people tell me, I don't remember anyone telling me they listen to disco, but I bet you if somebody watched this, there'd be somebody out there who does listen to disco. There's something for everybody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been here for about like an hour and a half. Maybe we should call it the stream.
Okay.
Do you have any maybe last minute advice and stuff like that, or where we can find you and stuff like that?
Well, if you want to find me, of course, I'm on Facebook under my name, my characters. I post there every day, but I also post every day, or at least I try to post every day on Twitter and on Instagram as well. So you can definitely find me there. I should have my website up by the end of the summer. As far as advice, because we've been talking about art and comics, I'm just going to reiterate what I said a little bit earlier, that if you like to draw, if you have creative ideas and you want to be an artist, it is a teachable skill. This is a skill you can learn, and it's not about talent. When I was younger, I used to think it was all about talent, and you'd look over at somebody and say, well, they're way more talented than I am. And then if that's the case, then you're beat. You're beat. You can't beat them. But if you think to yourself, it's about my hard work, my determination, getting good instruction, that's important, putting in the hours, a lot of them, then you've got it in your own hands and you can affect your own fate. So if you think those things and realize this is a teachable, learnable skill, you can have a tremendous amount of enjoyment, whether you do this for fun and your own pleasure, or whether you do it as a professional or whatever you do. And I think that's what I'd like to leave with.
All right. Well, thank you, Kent, for coming in. Really enjoyed this podcast with you. And I'm going to end the broadcast right now. So everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to everybody on Sunday, because I'm back on Sunday with going to try to. I don't know if you're on Betran, I believe his name is. He does the manufactured in Canada. I'm not sure if I said his name right, but I got an interview with him on Sunday, and then right after we're done with mine, I'm going over to his show, and he's going to do one with me. So that's going to be, we're going to be both 4 hours or whatever we take to do this, you know?
Fabulous. Well, let me say thank you for this. This has been a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah. All right. And just hold on for a moment there, Kent, while I end the broadcast here.
Okay.